this is big because for so long, all of us in our healthcare and pharma industries, we tried to treat men and women the same. That was our goal. We wanted to treat them equally. And now when we finally get close to that and treating them equally as, numbers in a trial and as data in a study, we realize that was the wrong goal. Treating
Yeah.
them equally is why women are showing twice the amount of side effects.
Yeah.
Treating them equally is why we don't understand these diseases. And so now it's time to change the paradigm so that future doctors and nurses and researchers don't grow up learning about a silent X, and they do grow up learning about the importance of sex-based differences for every health condition.
Hello and welcome to the Nurse Rosa's Insights podcast. I'm your host, Rosa Hart, and today I am joined by Jessica Federer. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So, Jessica and I met on Instagram, of course, like you do. Might have slid into each other's DMs a little bit. And we were fangirling over the latest outcoming research around women's health together. And then I found out she's the managing director of the Women's Health Fund. So, Jessica, let us know what that is, because that's a relatively new thing that you have put together, right?
Yes. And I have to say, it was such a surprise and delight to also literally run into each other in Vegas at the health
Mhm.
conference a month or so ago. And so we've actually already gotten to meet in person, which was a huge delight. And it's now nice to be reunited virtually. So the Women's Health Fund is a new investment vehicle. It's a fund of funds designed to bring established fund managers into the women's health space. And the reason for this is that, well, we need to invest a lot more in this category. So we didn't really study women. We don't really have enough data on women, and we do owe women decades of clinical research. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with women's health, we really weren't enabling women to participate in clinical trials in the United States until about 1993. That's the year that the movie Jurassic Park came out, if you want to
Oh my.
benchmark it to something. And that was just really for NIH funded
Mm.
research, not even all research. So, and this was largely done to protect women after the thalidomide disaster with birth defects. We excluded women of childbearing age from research. And so around 1993, we started to bring women back into research, but really never at the same level. So most research is anchored in the male cells, male mice, first in man studies. And so we are lacking a lot of information about people with an XX chromosome
Mhm.
because they haven't been studied as much. So we are now in recent years learning so many new and exciting things about how the X cells are different than the XY cells, and what that means across organ systems, what that means for response to drugs and medications and treatments, and what that means for disease manifestation. So, this as a nurse, women are 80%, 80% of autoimmune patients
Yep.
and two-thirds of Alzheimer's patients. And the leading cause of death in women is still heart disease. And most
Mhm.
people don't think of it as heart disease.
Which
So
includes stroke, I might add.
it includes stroke,
Mm.
definitely. And so we really need to start studying women more to
Yes.
understand, well, why are they differently and disproportionately impacted by some of these conditions? Why are they almost twice as likely to have side effects of medications than men? These are answers that we can get. And so the Women's Health Fund is designed to build the market by activating really well known, well established VC funds into the women's health space to get them out there looking for wonderful companies and great founders that they can mature and grow so that they can bring their diagnostics and devices and treatments and hopefully cures to the market.
Now, that is a big high level term, building a market. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
people will try to follow the market. So, but you're talking about going ahead of that. So, when you say we need to build a market, like break that down. What does that mean?
Yes. This is different. This is big. Building the market is creating the infrastructure that will be self-sustaining. So, an easy way to explain it, for those of you who like sports, is like building a women's soccer league in the United States. That's a whole new market, women's soccer league. So you have a lot of different teams, a lot of coaches. And to build the market, it's not enough just to have two or three coaches with a little experience going out to find some exceptional players. That won't get you a league. That's not enough teams to play. That's not enough players to move around. You need to really think about the entire infrastructure. And so you need lots of coaches out there scouting for exceptional talent that know how to build teams, how to coach through challenges, how to get them to championships. And then you need to build all the infrastructure around a new league. So, what are the support systems that you need to have around stadiums and media and coverage? There's so much around building a market. And it's pretty much the same in women's health. It's not enough for us to have a few great dedicated funds for women's health. That's wonderful. That's important. But that's not going to get us catching up to the data gap that we're trying to address.
Yeah.
So in this case,
And women are half of the population. So,
exactly.
how much money is there in clinical research right now? Is that something you're aware of at the moment?
There's a there's a lot. So, the pharma industry is about a $3 trillion industry, and generally for each new product, it costs about $1 billion and about 10 years to bring one new medicine to market.
Oh.
And so, it's if you're looking at getting new innovations, what are the new treatments that women need? Let's say for autoimmune disease.
Mhm,
Generally, what happens is you'll have research starting in a lab,
mhm.
and you'll have some great early stage research. And then, at some point, the researchers want to turn it into a company and they'll seek some investment and some funding. Hopefully, they'll get some grants first to do some research, some non dilutive funding. But then, when they turn it into a company, they get investors to come in. And those are the early stage investors. And they'll get them through a couple of the steps. But then you bring in some later stage investors that get them a little further. Now, in the pharma industry, generally, to get a product to market, there's usually a partnership. Some biotechs go to market themselves, but generally, for most pathways, there's a collaboration with a big pharma company that you know. So your Johnson and Johnson, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, names we all know really well, and they'll usually pick up a company or an asset around phase 2 and bring it into their pipeline. And the reason is they've got this huge global infrastructure that knows how to do big clinical trials around the world, that knows how to work with regulators, that knows how to work with payers so that when the drug does get approved, you have access to it. And so they bring it into these companies. And so you need the investors, though, to get it to a stage where the pharma companies can pick it up. Or if it's a biotech company that's going to launch it itself, you need the investors to follow through the whole time. So it's important to activate many more investors and very experienced investors at established funds that know how to build companies, know how to deliver returns to investors, and,
Mhm.
and know how to get these assets to market.
Yeah, because the key is, like you said, to be sustainable. This is not something that is trendy. Like, it is trendy right now on Instagram. Like, I don't know if it's because I've been liking all your posts, and I am not old enough to be in perimenopause or anything, but I'm seeing so much about menopause. So on
Well, you know
Instagram,
what it is.
I mean, I think it's really nice that we should get to talk about it now, women's specific needs, because I think there was a degree to which we couldn't talk about it without getting a lot of flack when people were in denial about the physiological differences between men and women. And
Yes.
with a lack of research, there wasn't as much to support it, right? So I think we're going to learn a lot really fast.
And this is you bring up a good point. You're seeing a lot now. And this is actually something that it's encouraging, but with every good side, there's a bad side. So the pharma industry is about a $3 trillion industry. Sounds like a lot until you hear that the wellness industry is almost double that, around 6 trillion. And the wellness industry is largely these supplements
Mhm.
and things that didn't have to get a regulatory approval that are just selling to you. And so that's what you see a lot of on social media because they're looking for those sales. And so the challenge really is now that we're talking about these issues that differently and disproportionately impact women, we still need to keep a focus on the evidence. And
Mhm.
since there haven't been the clinical trials and there hasn't been the data, there really isn't as much evidence as you would expect. I use some examples when I talk to students. I'll ask, well, what year did we first see what happens to a woman's brain during pregnancy, throughout her pregnancy? What year would you guess? What do you think, Rosa?
Well, let's see. You said not till like 1993, so my guess would be after that when it's becoming more mainstream.
You're right. So, but when I ask students, they usually guess when it's around MRIs came out or when PET scans came out. The first year we saw what happens to a woman's brain during pregnancy was actually a study that was published last year in
What?
2024. And it actually took a woman herself, who is a researcher, to do scans every week during her pregnancy and post pregnancy so that we could see how the brain structure changed and how plastic it becomes during pregnancy, how the size changes. And it was just last year.
And this was without contrast, right?
This is looking at the MRIs of the woman's brain to see the size change. And then,
What?
you go further in, and the first year that we saw how an embryo implants in a uterus was actually just this year.
Oh my gosh.
In 2025. So if you're looking at how much science we still have to learn, and of course, I don't know about you, but when I was in school, we were taught that the second X chromosome is silent. Because of course,
Well,
the humans that grow and birth every life on the planet have a whole chromosome that's redundant. you know.
because that's what women are known for is being silent, right? And
Oh, well,
usually you have twice as much of something. They say things like double the fun.
well, we are double the fun for sure. Uh, and it turns out the X chromosome is double the fun. It's not silent. So now when we talk about the X chromosome, it was X with a little I, the inactive X. Well, now we know in recent years, it escapes inactivity and it escapes inactivity differently for different women. So we have so much to learn about how this entire chromosome escapes inactivity and then what it does, because we know the X chromosome carries a lot of the genes responsible for the immune response. And we know women are 80% of autoimmune disease. So
What?
this is something that we really need to look into more, but the research just hasn't been there because we were largely studying humans with an XY chromosome, and so this really didn't come up. Now an interesting point here for those who are looking at sex-based differences is that the Y chromosome, it actually sort of disappears, vanishes in 6 cells. So one of the ways you can see when cells are cancerous is the Y chromosome is actually you can't find it. It goes
Oh,
away.
wow.
And so, we are learning how important it is to look at sex-based differences. Now, this is big because for so long, all of us in our healthcare and pharma industries, we tried to treat men and women the same. That was our goal. We wanted to treat them equally. And now, when we finally get close to that and treating them equally as, numbers in a trial and as data in a study, we realize that was the wrong goal. Treating
Yeah.
them equally is why women are showing twice the amount of side effects.
Yeah.
Treating them equally is why we don't understand these diseases. And so now it's time to change the paradigm so that future doctors and nurses and researchers don't grow up learning about a silent X chromosome, and they do grow up learning about the importance of sex-based differences for every health condition.
Right, because women may need a lower dose of medications. It's weight is not the only factor. Like we metabolize things differently. And what impact do our hormone fluctuations have on how we metabolize medicine, food, all kinds of different things? And so it's really can open up Pandora's box, but honestly, the box has been open. We just weren't looking.
You're probably right. So I'm curious, when you were in school, what did you learn about sex-based differences in medical care?
Well, I I will be honest, I had to repeat my peds and OB semester, so I learned every way pregnancy could kill you twice. Um,
Oh,
uh,
well, given our maternal mortality rate in the US, it's good to be an expert in that.
yeah, yeah, no kidding, and the thing is, that's one reason that women are more likely than men to have a stroke, especially in those childbearing years, because those hormones fluctuating and the strain on your body and can cause, high blood pressure, gestational diabetes, and things that can set you up to have preeclampsia and a stroke, and that's not something people usually expect, but especially in
Mhm.
the United States, we need to be vigilant about that and not think that pregnancy is some safe thing that your body knows how to do. Well, not here. It doesn't know how to do that here.
No.
We're not
For
good.
anyone out there of your listeners who's very motivated, I've long wanted to see a pregnancy checklist that lists all the things you're at risk for at each trimester. I was on the board at Sage Therapeutics and we launched the first postpartum depression drug.
Re-
And we have biomarkers now that can tell you from a blood test if you're at high risk for having postpartum depression because it has to do with the chemical levels in your brain. And so, it would be really nice if we had a checklist of, okay, first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, when do you need to worry about gestational diabetes? When do you need to worry about preeclampsia? When do you need to worry about stroke? When do you need to worry about postpartum depression? And put it all together because right now it's so hard for women to find information. And there's actually a wonderful new startup here in New York City um, called Zenith Health. And they're just focused on providing evidence based data to pregnant women
Wow.
because we don't study pregnant women. We don't study women in general, but we really don't study pregnant women.
Yeah.
And so there's just a lack of data. And moms need to be able to prevent a high fever and they need to be able to take care of themselves to stay healthy while they're pregnant. And we need more data on what is safe, what works, and what they can do. So I think what will be exciting is the amount of new data, evidence based data that we're generating. This isn't AI data because right now you can't use a lot of AI technologies because those have to be trained on real data sets first. And a lot of the
Yeah.
data, it doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We haven't
So it,
captured it yet.
exactly. So at this point, when someone tells you they can use AI to solve women's health, they don't know what they're talking about. We need some foundational studies done first before we can apply AI. We have more data to train technology before we can use it with people.
Well, I think one thing, hopefully, if they're smart, what they meant was like, I just came back from this AI Med conference in San Diego, which was like 800 doctors, and well, almost 800 of them were doctors. There was about 100 nurses in there as well. Learning about AI and how we can harness it to improve things in healthcare and actually meet
Mhm.
real problems and not just get solutions from tech companies who want to make money off healthcare but don't understand our problems. And one thing they were talking about a lot was wearables and digital therapeutics that utilize AI to capture data, like, and identify patterns from that data. So I think in ways like that, it's being used, especially even in women's health, to see how our temperature is fluctuating over time and throughout the month and throughout our ovulations.
Absolutely. For
So,
monitoring, it's wonderful. And we see the examples of Aura
mhm,
and other medical devices that use that really effectively.
yeah,
It's more about for new drug discoveries
gotcha.
because you have to have something, you have to have a foundational data set before you can use new technologies to see what's possible.
Mhm,
And if we really haven't studied this population, that's where we need to start. But luckily, frankly, this is really fixable
uh-huh,
and we like fixable challenges. We're not waiting on new infrastructure to be scaled, like cell and gene therapy, because right now each new gene therapy treatment has to be formulated for each individual person. There's a high rate of errors. It's very expensive, very time consuming. The technology for that is not widespread, scalable yet. So we're still waiting on some developments. It's getting there and is moving fast. And I'm very excited by the new technologies coming out. But we need infrastructure to scale there. Here in women's health, we're not waiting on infrastructure. We just need to turn our lens to a population that hasn't been in focus and
Mhm.
actually look at how they're different. This is so fixable, and it's fixable in such an exciting way because some of the things we discover will be immediately actionable for drugs that are on the market or for
Yeah.
conditions that we know well. And then things that aren't immediately actionable, we know how to develop medicines, we know how to test out diagnostics, we know what to do with new medical devices. So this is all actionable, solvable things that we're talking about, which is why it's a great time to invest and why it's a wonderful time to activate new investors into the space.
Yeah, you wanna talk about some of your investment partners that have joined your fund?
Sure. A fund of funds is a little bit of a different vehicle. Instead of investing in companies, we invest in other funds. And so these are all the collaborations will be with partners that are quite established and that are known in the field, that are usually have had a few funds under their belt, and they know how to get to an exit. They know how to build companies. They know how to support founders. They know how to help them raise later stage rounds that are really experienced. And so these are the partners that will be investing in companies. Now, the partners that are investing into the fund are largely strategics and family offices and other investors that want to see the market built. And fund to funds are nice because they're generally accepted as a more risk balanced approach because you instead of looking at a number of companies, you're looking at a number of companies inside a number of funds, and so it's a much more spread out risk. So it's a new way to activate more capital into women's health. Now, the model itself is one that's been done numerous times before. This is a well-known vehicle. It's just the first time somebody's tried it in women's health.
Yeah, and when we were at Health the conference, HLTH, you made your announcement about it, on stage with someone from McKinsey, someone saying the Go Red for Women's Fund from the American Heart Association, and then I
And
think it.
Dr. Safdar, who's the director of women's health research at Yale, um,
Yes.
and that's the oldest women's health research institution in the U.S. With the Yale Medical School.
Oh,
And
wow.
Dr. Safdar is incredible. She's a ER physician,
Mhm.
and to have a medical school like Yale that's got a whole group focused on women's health, and she'll talk about the differences that they saw in how women respond to COVID, how women respond to different medications, the differences you see in the emergency room, particularly around heart disease and around heart attacks, and how women describe their symptoms. So
Mhm.
she's leading just brilliant work over at Yale. The McKinsey team has been one of the most impactful groups in recent years. I I don't know if you remember, but a few years ago, I mean, it was really only 4 or 5 years ago, there wasn't any data that you could reference about women's health and the women's health market. There were a few studies done by groups that were, obviously quite biased because it was their interest area and they had a clear conflict. But there wasn't a neutral place where you could go for referenceable data that you could stand behind and make a decision to invest behind. And once a giant like McKinsey, which is known for the breadth and depth of their research. Once they started writing about the women's health market, and in full transparency, I'm an advisor to McKinsey, so I've been involved with this for a while, but they've just got a remarkable team. Lucy Perez, which is the leader of, she's the global leader at the McKinsey Health Institute, and she's
Mhm.
a senior partner. She and her team have been putting out these phenomenal reports about what is the opportunity in women's health, what is the data around the prevalence and the difference and the economic impact? So, for example, um, 1 in 10 women has endometriosis. Well, 1 in 10 people have diabetes. So, if you're looking at prevalence, you've got 1 in 10 with endometriosis and 1 in 10 with diabetes, but the diabetes market is huge. We've got
Yeah.
so many diagnostics and treatments and devices and support and platforms and everything wrapped around those patients. Women with endometriosis still take years to even find a diagnosis. There's really no good treatments available for them.
Yeah.
There's nothing. But if you're looking at the size of the market opportunity,
Yeah.
the
That,
size of the opportunity for the investors, for the pharma companies, and then, of course, for us personally, the size of the benefit you can have for humanity, for these women who've been suffering, um, there's no reason for us to wait any longer. And so all of the data around the differences in the conditions, the differences in the market, these are really helpful to have a group like McKinsey bring out very, very clearly in black and white with the references, with the data, with the primary research, so that we can make decisions and to move in that space. And then the panelists you mentioned from the American Heart Association Go Red for Women Fund,
mhm.
Tracy Warren. This is a really cool fund. The Go Red for Women Fund is it was announced last year, and until it was announced, the largest dedicated fund in women's health was only $40 million.
Really?
So $40 million was the largest dedicated women's health fund until last year.
The
So
largest
the
single fund.
yeah, the largest venture capital fund
Mhm.
investing in women was only around $40 million. So the Go Red for Women fund came out, and they're much bigger than that already.
Oh, good.
And they are really investing, with the American Heart Association. It's a philanthropic foundation organization, but they're investing in companies that are making a meaningful difference for women with cardiovascular disease. So it's in line with their mission, but they're doing actual venture capital investments. And their emergence on the scene was a really big sign to the market because it was then the largest when they announced. And since they've announced, it's helped build the market even more. And
Yeah.
this year at the Health of Women Investor Summit, we even had two new funds announced, and both of them were 250 million. So in a short time span of a few years, we've gone from the largest fund being 40 million to 250 million, which is a 6x increase. And we're
Well,
going to keep seeing that grow as we start to see those successes, as we start to see those exits, as we see more treatments and therapies come to market and help more people. As that data comes out, it's going to fuel more investment and larger funds.
yeah, and I believe the Melinda French Gates Foundation was one of those contributors, right?
Yeah, Pivotal Ventures is a remarkable organization. This is the VC that Melinda French Gates has, and they recently announced, well, two big announcements. A month or so ago, they announced an initiative with the Welcome Leaps program, where they're doing these 3-year sprints.
Oh,
$50 million, 3 years to focus on something. And they picked 5 areas that are really focused on women. So, stillbirths, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune disease. They Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Lisa
yeah.
Mosconi. They picked these areas where if we can make any progress in 3 years with these great researchers and the resources of both Pivotal and Welcome Leaps, that's phenomenal. And then I think the news came out the day before yesterday that Melinda French Gates is putting another 250 million into she had opened up a call for people to apply for more philanthropic funding to advance the space. So we're really starting to see more capital flow in, and that's important because it's still, as I mentioned earlier, it costs about $1 billion to make a new medicine. So 250 million is wonderful, but we still need a lot more capital to get to a new medicine. And so we need the later stage investors. We need our wonderful drug discovery companies, our drug development companies. We need that innovation to be picked up so that that additional, those little millions to start are really impactful. They make a huge difference, but it still costs about $1 billion in 10 years to get that new medicine out.
Yeah. And I think you have set us up for the $1 billion question. It's like
Oh,
you were
yes.
headed, Jessica.
Yes.
So, well, and a lot of people ask a magic wand question, which I'm definitely not trying to do on this podcast
No.
because I really want to be solutions focused. And the thing is, this is like what you do every day, like as your actual job is talk about how to make the world better with large sums of money. So it might seem like chump change to you, honestly, but you said $1 million could get you a new drug to market, right? So if you were given a grant for $1 billion to
Mhm.
meet one need that you see in healthcare, how would and it doesn't have to be women's health, you're doing a lot for women's health, so in case you wanna branch out at all, feel free to. But if you could direct it strategically to have the most sustainable impact, how would you like to see it used?
Well, they say do what you know, and so it is gonna be in women's health.
Okay.
So if I got a grant for $1 billion, I would do what the Women's Health Fund is doing at a larger scale and invest that into a lot more VC firms to activate them into women's health so that we can get as many venture capital firms as possible out there deliberately looking for new women's health companies to fund and grow and scale. And that's important for so many reasons, but it creates a self fulfilling engine and it uses the market forces to keep it going. So, as a VC invests in a women's health company and it does well and it has a really successful exit, well, they're able to give capital back to their investors, which their investors like and usually reinvest. They're able to make, as a fund manager, they make their profit off of it. The market benefits, the companies that buy it benefit, the patients benefit. So you're creating the market forces that are self-sustaining. And so that's why I would still invest it into funds because then you're building it into a vehicle that is sustainable by the market forces that we have today. And, sometimes there are opportunities to change the rules of the game you're playing. Other times, you just play by the rules and you can get to where you're going for that. And in this case, we're still playing by the rules of VC, but we're playing by the rules to get to a different direction. And we're playing by the existing venture capital rules to activate much more investment into a space that will benefit 51% of the population. Or, if you want to go even bigger, the source of every human on the planet.
Yeah,
And so the amount of innovation, the amount of new companies, the amount of blockbuster products that will come out of activating more experienced investors that establish funds into women's health is really encouraging.
that is really amazing. And so for people listening to this who think, "Okay, but I don't have $1 million to invest in a fund for whatever my cause is," right?
Yeah.
But they catch the vision for what you're
Mhm.
trying to do,
Oh,
I how could they jump in and participate?
we need everyone to participate. First of all, sign up for a clinical trial. Um,
Well, that
please
sounds easy enough.
sign up for a clinical trial. They're amazing. I have served on the Yale IRB Institutional Review Board. I started doing it when I was in grad school.
Oh, wow.
And it's always a little frightening to step back and realize our entire multi-trillion dollar drug industry is fueled by volunteers.
Wow.
Volunteers. We need volunteers to sign up for every single clinical trial, for everything that happens in this space. So enroll in a clinical trial. Go to clinicaltrials.gov and see what you can enroll in. If you really like the science, learning something new, I really encourage you to consider becoming a non-scientific member or a scientific member if you have that background of an IRB, an institutional review board. Now, IRBs have been around for a long time and they've been established to ensure human subjects protections, human research protections. You're reading the consent form. Does it make sense? Are the participants, the volunteers, getting their parking covered? There shouldn't be a burden on a volunteer to help advance science because the trials are not designed to benefit the volunteer. It's to advance science. So you have to reduce the burden on them. So are you covering their parking, their child care, their travel? Are you giving as much as possible to these volunteers to reduce the burden? And in the US, we are able to compensate clinical trial participants at whatever level we want, as long as an IRB says it's not coercive.
Mm,
So are we even paying appropriately? Are we giving a stipend that matches the time taken off of work, the effort? Are we really treating these volunteers the best we can? So you can sign up for a clinical trial. You can participate on an IRB, an institutional review board. Every medical school has one for the research that happens at their medical school. So you've got one locally. And then, what each of us can do is ask the questions. Was this medicine studied in women?
mm,
Were the side effects different in women? Is the dosage different in women? Start asking the questions, because that is really powerful in raising awareness. Because still today, a lot of people don't know that men and women don't respond the same, that women are so differently and disproportionately impacted by some disorders and conditions. And so just talk about it and listen to your podcast and share your podcast. But, talking about it sounds so simple, but it is the most powerful. And that's, I think, why your podcast is so important. It's such a powerful tool because once you've educated someone, they're not going to forget what you've taught them. That is now part of their awareness, part of their consciousness. So once someone understands that X and Y cells reply differently than X and X cells, once they understand the impact of sex based differences, once they understand what it means for their mom and their sister and their daughter and their aunt and their friends, they're not going to forget that. And so we need to start changing the culture, changing research, changing drug discovery and development. And then, most importantly, getting to where you are leading the way, changing the care delivery and care practice. So many of our guidelines don't have a sex based
right.
consideration, and they probably should. So, as we collect data, we're probably going to need to update some guidelines so that the care is more appropriately given to women and men. But there's something everyone can do. Talk to your family members, talk to your friends and neighbors, and start asking a lot of questions that probably haven't been asked before. And most people think women's health it sounds like it's an old field that's been around a while, but as we said at the very beginning of this discussion, 1993 was the year Jurassic Park came out. It wasn't that long ago, and that
Yeah.
was just NIH-funded studies. So we are making history right now, today, for science, for medicine, and so everyone can be a part of that.
I think that means that women's health is a millennial. You know? I think it fits in that age range there. I'm not 100% sure what the cutoff is, but I'm a millennial, so it fits in there. Um, you make a really good point about asking questions instead of just go tell people things because people are really bad at listening. And so if you try to tell them something, they're gonna be thinking about what their reply is gonna be, or what they're gonna have for lunch. You know, they may be totally detached, but if you ask somebody a question, that really engages them into the conversation, and then if they realize they don't have a good answer or there isn't a good answer, that realization is their own that they came
Mhm,
to. And like you said, they won't forget it then.
mhm.
So I
Well
think that
said.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, listening helps, but asking questions is a good way around it.
Exactly, exactly. There are some people who don't volunteer to listen, but they love to have an answer. So when you give them the
Ask a lot of questions.
opportunity, yeah, it
Ask
that's
a lot
the
of
Socratic
questions.
method there.
And going back to the things we discussed, what does pregnancy do to a woman's brain? How does an embryo implant into a uterus? Why are women 80% of autoimmune conditions? These are all questions that we're just now starting to understand answers to. So, for anyone who's interested in the sciences or has children that might be interested in going into the sciences, encouraging them that there's a whole new untapped field.
Right.
What will be a lot of new jobs, a lot of new businesses, a lot of new research opportunities. So to start getting an interest in that early on
Mhm.
would be really helpful in building new careers because this wave is coming. Now that we know the cells respond differently, we're not going to keep treating them the same. The research is coming, the companies are coming, the progress is coming.
Mhm.
So let's move it along, let's bring everybody into it, and let's accelerate the growth and innovation as fast as we can.
I love how you're just seeing all the spokes of this wheel that you are pushing forward. It's so cool because a lot of people are, laser focused on their piece, but I love how
Mm.
you're really seeing and pointing out all the different facets and how they all work together to build a system to support it. Um, I think that's really beautiful. So thank you so much for your work in this area. And um, I mean, I don't know how hard it is when you're really passionate about something, but I definitely know what it's like when you can't stop talking about something, and
Mm.
sometimes it feels like people don't wanna listen, especially for a long period of time. Did
Yeah.
you did you go through that?
So this is a great point, Rosa. Yeah. But it's not the first time I've gone through it. So when I was chief digital officer at Bayer, I was actually the first female chief digital officer for the pharma industry, the first chief digital officer for Bayer, and I was only the second chief digital officer overall for the entire industry. So I was part of something new, and part of that is you have to explain to people, the C-suite, the board, all the employees, all the stakeholders, why should they care?
Right.
Why do they care that we need digital? What does that mean to them? Why is it important? Then why should they invest in it? Why should they prioritize it? And then you get on this curve. So, let's take the chief digital officer example. Now every pharma company has a chief digital or chief data officer. Um, and they know the value and they know to invest. But now we're on this curve of how do you really integrate digital into the business? So, at some point when I was CDO, I remember telling the organization, because digital was then really hot and exciting, and everybody wanted to have digital in their title, digital
Mm.
communications, digital marketing, digital medical. And so at some point I said, if you have digital in your title, you will be out of a job because the whole point of digital isn't to have parallel organizations, digital marketing, communications and digital communications. The whole point of a digital transformation is to integrate digital into it.
Yeah.
So it's okay to call it out at the beginning and say, I'm responsible for digital and I'm focused on digital. But at some point, the digital has to become so integrated. It's just marketing again. It's just communications again. It's just medical affairs again. And we're doing exactly the same thing now in women's health. On the evolution curve, right now we have to call it out and we have to allocate resources and we have to develop expertise. But the sign of success will be when it's just integrated in. It's not women's health, it is health. And we don't have to ask about women in studies because sex-based differences are included in every study and
Mhm.
every piece of research and every care decision. And so when we've succeeded, it will be integrated in fully and be part of how we operate in research and healthcare delivery. And so this is just the normal curve of doing something new. And it does start with saying, why should you care? That's always the first thing. Start with the why. Why does it matter to you? Why now? What difference does it make? And then you go all the way through to fully integrating it in. And then we'll have another challenge to address.
I'm sure there will be more, but at least this is big enough to keep us busy for a little while.
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to be on this journey with you and to keep learning from you. So, if anybody wants to follow you, tell us about your handle on Instagram where you make those great
Of
reels.
course. Yes, I've started talking about research in women's health on Instagram. So it's JJ Feds. And you can also find me on LinkedIn as well, Jessica Federer. And of course, I look forward to welcoming many more people into the exciting and new and fast paced world of driving progress in women's health.
And I'm along for the ride. So,
Thank
let's
you.
buckle up. So, if you've enjoyed this episode of the Nurse Rosa's Insights podcast, make sure you like and subscribe wherever you're listening or if you're watching on YouTube. Feel free to leave a comment if you learned something or if you know of somebody else with a $1 billion idea that can make the future of healthcare better. You send them over here to me and I will talk to them. I want to hear about it. So you'll find me on social media at Nurse Rosa Speaks on all the different platforms. And then I'm also on LinkedIn. I'll have Jessica's links in the show notes as well as mine. And I'll look forward to seeing you then. Until then, and I'll see you in the next episode.